Hello, I'm Michael Parker, and welcome to Antidote. Today we're going to discuss the question, is Islam a religion of peace or a religion of war? It's a simple question, but the answers are complex. Joining us from Hawaii to discuss this is Dr. Saleem Ahmed. He is an author, he is a scholar, he is the founder of All Believers Network. He wrote a recent paper called Challenging ISIS on Its Own Turf for the International Relations website. Saleem, welcome to Antidote.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be here.
Well, we're very pleased that you could join us. You know what? I read the paper and I've seen some other video work that you've done, and you bring up some excellent points, but we're going to start with some broad strokes on Islam, and then we're going to dial deeper into what you're trying to express. But let's start with this. Tell us, especially for those of us here in the West, what's something about Islam and the Quran that we do not know?
Probably the fact that the Quran was revealed to Muhammad over a 23-year period, and it passed through what I call three distinct phases. The first phase was when Muhammad was trying to get this religion disseminated. It was the stage of spirituality and invitation. He received negative feedback and got persecuted. So then divine inspiration gave Muhammad the permission to retaliate. So it went through a period of about 10 to 12 years of retaliation. And finally, the last period of about 2 years when it reverted to peace. And that is the Islam that Muslims should focus on.
So, all right, so you're saying that this information was revealed to Muhammad over 3 different periods of his life, and towards the end, he was becoming somewhat more conciliatory. But who wrote all of this information down? How did that happen? Good
question. Muhammad would get divine inspirations. He was an illiterate person, so when he would get in an inspiration, he would ask one of his literate followers to come and write it down. Now, during this period, he probably had 20 plus followers, transcribers, on a space available basis, on a time available basis. So different revelations were recorded by different transcribers at different times over those 23 years.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand this. So over the 23 years of his work and these 3 periods that he went through, he also had about 20 different people that he's giving the information to. They write the information down, but then where does the information go?
Fantastic. Let me clarify here. The inspirations were divine, but their writing was human, and this is where the problem is. So when Muhammad died, someone collected all this information, which was spread out over 20 plus followers, and it was compiled. And here's the problem. We do not know the procedure followed by this person, his name was Zaid, in compiling this. So the Quran, unfortunately, as it appears, is not chronologically arranged.
That is one of the most important things that I've taken away from your work, and we're going to revisit that over and over. But you're saying this individual, Zaid, was the one who gathered the documents or the texts or what had been written down from these 20 some odd people. I'm assuming that he did that over a period of time. I'm sure he had to hunt some of these people down, I'm guessing. And how long did it take him to compile the information?
Apparently not too long.
Okay.
He got this information, I guess, over maybe 1 year, and the information was compiled within maybe 2 or 3 years after Muhammad's death.
Now, you're saying that the information is not in a chronological order, so why would that be? Did they simply not have the knowledge that this was said on this day, or was that done intentionally? Why is the Quran laid out in such a way? Also, do you think most Muslims know this?
Good questions. Let me address the second one first.
Okay.
Most Muslims do not realize that the Quran is not arranged chronologically. Now, to answer the first question, you see, since there was no sort of central collection agency, so each transcriber sort of worked on his own basis. If, for example, I'm a transcriber, I transcribe today, I'm gone for a week on some travel, I come back and transcribe again. While I was gone, someone else did the transcribing. So what I did was not linked to what others did. When I spoke again, it was linked to what I did before, not realizing this period which was of a week or longer, where I was gone. So this is what happened. Unfortunately, it appears no one wrote down the date on which any revelations came. So when this guy, this Zaid, got these transcriptions, there were 6,200 verses. I just imagined, my God, someone wrote these on a parchment, someone wrote these on leather, and someone wrote it on dried leaves, date palm leaves. So trying to put all this together must have been fantastic, a tremendous problem, and apparently he must have tried his best. I imagine that he just took, for example, one person's work and put that together, consolidated it, and another person's work and consolidated that, not realizing that the person A may have done one work, then person B took over, then person C, and then he came back again. So that connection apparently was not either recognized, or they probably did not know what happened.
I understand. And why this is pertinent to our conversation is that as he's collecting this information and putting it together, it does not take into account for the change of heart, the change of perspective that Muhammad went through those 23 years. So we're going to keep returning to this because to me, this is one of the biggest points we're going to make. And he became more conciliatory towards non-Muslims towards the end. But let me ask you this, because if I'm understanding you correctly as well, is that whether Islam is a religion of peace or a religion of war would then be determined entirely by the interpretation. So, of the Quranic passages. So, who's in charge of what is the right interpretation?
First, let me answer the first question. Yes, the extremists are as much following Quranic passages as the doves. Let's make that clear. They are following the Quran. It's just that they are following one type of passages and the doves are following another type of passages. And there is no central authority, especially among Sunni Muslims. There's no clerical hierarchy to say that what you're saying is wrong and what he's saying is right. So in a way, it has its strengths and weaknesses, but currently each person, you might say, makes his own interpretation. One of the first things that I hope can happen out of this discussion, Michael, is that Muslims realize the recognition or realize the importance of trying to put the Quran in chronological order to determine what was the context in which Muhammad said so and so, and then a completely opposite message at another time.
I understand what you're saying, and I would only offer that the misinterpretations of sacred texts would not be limited just to Islam. I mean, we certainly, even within Christianity, we see people that take particular portions of the Bible and then they handle snakes or what have you, and, because they think that's a demonstration of what they've read. So, we're not picking on Islam. We're simply saying something very fundamental here, which is that in your view, the fact that it is not chronological and does not display the evolution of his pattern of thought towards the end of his life is a huge issue.
It is.
Okay, well, I also, when I was doing my research, I encountered a word, and I will probably butcher it, but it regards critical thinking in Islam, and I believe it's pronounced ijtihad. Is that correct?
Ijtihad. Yeah,
ijtihad. Okay, explain what that is. And some people would argue that they don't seem to see a lot of critical thinking in Islam, but explain what this is and what its place in Islam is.
You're asking a very good question, Michael. Ijtihad means introspection, soul searching, and things of that sort. And this was a strong point in among Muslims for a period of time. But then imagine that some group of people, I'm sure they had the right intentions in mind, they determined and said that henceforth ijtihad will stop. So they put a curtain on that. And so, in a way, Muslims then um, got away from doing ijtihad and just following what had been done previously. And I believe, therefore, I think it was unfortunate that ijtihad was brought to a close by some human beings, good intentions, but wrong conclusion. And I think Muslims should go back and reinvent, or not reinvent, but rediscover ijtihad. There's much, much, much soul searching that Muslims have to do.
And how long ago or how recently ago was this done away with?
I would say, and I'm guessing now, maybe 500-600 years ago.
Holy cow. Well, okay, now we're talking about a lot of time here in which for this, for critical thinking to be not part of the process.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's talk about this because now we need to move to 21st century and latter part of the 20th century. What you're saying makes sense to me, but what do you think are the root causes of Islamic extremism, really? Because I've got my own ideas, but I want to hear from you.
Okay. Fundamentally, we can go back to Muhammad's time. When he started, he was being persecuted. So at that time, the divine guidance he got, for example, said, do not trust Jews and Christians. After some times when relations with Christians became better, actually relations with Christians were never bad. It was with Jews that there was problem. Then the passage which came out was sort of saying you can trust Christians but not Jews. And then finally, in the last year of Muhammad's life, when he had neutralized opposition and had won over most of the people, the message was Jews and Christians are people of the book. You can eat and intermarry with them. And incidentally, the word people of the book is not just Jews and Christians, but anyone who believes in an eternal being and follows righteous deeds. So that way, I think Islam can be a champion of interfaith dialogue.
I understand, and I like what you're saying. Now, I'm going to counter that because I understand where you're coming from and what you're trying to do, and I think it's great, and I think ultimately the information that you're imparting has to come from within the Islamic community. But I guess what I'd have to say when I'm thinking about extremism, I feel like there is a large portion of social engineering that's happening here. When the Saudis put money into Wahhabi madrasas and we raise entire generations of angry youth, and rightly so. I mean, when you look at Western interventionism within the Middle East, I mean, I understand why these people are upset. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is I understand that you're saying that there are fundamental misinterpretations of what Muhammad said because it's not in chronological order. But I'm also saying since like 1979, which is when I believe you started your work, I mean, the beast and the fire has been stoked by other factors.
Yep. The thing is, there's a saying, nothing succeeds like success.
Yes.
So when you start something for good or evil, and it's successful, then sort of there's this mob psychology, mob hysteria, which moves that forward. So, for example, let's take 9/11, for example. From the extremist point of view, it was very successful. They shook up the entire world, and because they were able to relate that to the Quran, then that scholarly attitude of following the part of retaliation took over. And then, people like me felt, my God, we were horrified, but the world attention was on extremists, and unfortunately, that world attention on extremism has continued. So people who want to do positive things, unfortunately, and this is no fault of the medium, that we do not get the recognition that we want, and therefore, Michael, I'm very thankful to you for giving me this opportunity together.
Well, I'm very appreciative of you being on because what you've got to say is very important. And I'm not trying to be a downer when I'm saying that, hey, listen, you know what? I mean, Western intelligence agencies, Saudi money, and we looked, you know, the Mujahideen, the Taliban, Al Qaeda, ISIS, these things did not happen in a vacuum. These things didn't just. When I look at this, I understand that these texts have always existed, but what I'm saying is, from my point of view, Islamic extremism in the form of terrorism of this nature, it hasn't been around that long. Am I wrong?
No, you're correct, entirely correct.
And I think we have to, you know, I think everybody's like, Parker, that's obvious. And you know what, we have to say it because when you look in the mainstream media, they're not talking about this. We need to put all the cards on the table, face up, and you know, hopefully this 28 pages will be, these redacted pages will be seen soon, and they may show, which I think they're going to, large Saudi involvement in money for these terrorists. You know, there's a lot more to all of these things, but let me ask you this.
Can I just
Go for it.
a clarification? When we say Saudi money, I guess it's generally, it sort of puts the feeling that it's Saudi government money. It does not necessarily have to be. I think the Saudi government is trying its best to curb extremists. So it's Saudi money, and there are many, many rich people in Saudi Arabia who can spend millions of dollars just in the wink of an eye. So it is those people, and I think it's very important for the listeners to differentiate and realize this.
Point well taken. Thank you for correcting me. I get totally what you're saying, so I respect that. Well, let me ask you this, because right now there's this bad taste in everyone's mouth about all this. So what do you think the future of the Muslim world is?
Excellent question. Muslims have to do ijtihad. They've got to go back and try to look at the Quran chronologically. Now, this is going to be very difficult because two things. One, Muslims generally believe that the Quran is perfect, it needs no corrections on one side. On the other side, the information, when did Muhammad say so and so, that information is hard to get. But I believe we can probably succeed in putting this together for about maybe 20% of the Quran. And if you look at it this way, that 50% of the Quran deals with spiritual matters. So we are talking of 20% or 50%. So we might say 40% of all. And then there are many passages which are neutral. So if we deal with 20% of Quranic verses and put those in chronological order, we would have made tremendous progress. It can be done.
Well, the message that you're giving, how is it being received by your fellow Muslims?
People, moderates like me, are taking it very well. But then there are sort of the other side, one side which says, how dare you believe that the Quran needs to be rewritten? And I must clarify, I'm not asking for rewriting the Quran. I'm asking that we should try to understand when different passages were revealed. And that's a very big difference. And in other cases, they think that since the Quran is perfect, any move to try to do anything else is blasphemy.
I understand that. I would ask you, how many people feel the way you feel? Are you the originator of this idea, or have a lot of people thought this for a long time?
Well, many people have thought about this, but unfortunately, it's like saying only the squeaking wheel gets the oil.
Right.
So people have been talking about, and in fact, Michael, if you go back 100 years, what Islam that I grew up with was the Islam of Rumi, the Sufis, and those are still there, but they are in the background. Unfortunately, they've fallen there. So the we need to go back and do this introspection. So I haven't answered your question. I believe many Muslims, they may not believe, they may not have thought about the Quran being not arranged chronologically, but they do recognize that yes, there is something wrong. They believe that extremists are misinterpreting the Quran. Unfortunately, they are not. They are talking about passages of the Quran which they believe in, and they feel that this will earn them vestal virgins in paradise. So there is all that temptation, that motivation which goes with what they're saying. What we need to do is those passages were superseded by passages of peace. And one actually, incidentally, one Quranic verse says, whenever God supersedes a verse, he replaces it with something similar or better. So the Quran recognizes the progressive revelations. It recognizes that there were passages which were superseded. So now it's up to Muslims to determine the history of these passages.
I get it. You mentioned, and you read my mind, you mentioned Rumi and Sufism. Explain to our viewers who may not know, what is that?
Rumi was a philosopher, and I'm forgetting, probably about 500-600 years back. I'm forgetting the chronology, but he did not invent anything new. He was a philosopher, and he believed in the type of Islam that I'm now trying to promote. And Islam, when you look at the last passages that Muhammad received of believing in interfaith dialogue, interfaith harmony, etc., that's the message that Rumi went forward with. It's very philosophical, it's very peaceful, and actually surprising in a way. It's very good this happened, that in America now a new religion called Sufism was born. I have attended meeting of Sufis in Honolulu. It's wonderful. The Honolulu group, for example, one of the leaders is a Catholic nun, and she is doing wonderful. That group is doing wonderful. They meet, they talk about God and in revelations and the righteousness that Sufism promotes, and move forward with that. To me, that is what Islam should be.
I understand. Let me ask you this. You are the founder of this group, All Believers Network. Maybe I just misunderstood you just then, but what is All Believers Network?
Fantastic. Thank you for asking that. Since the Quran says God sent prophets to all nations of the world, messengers to all nations of the world, so it was not just the Middle East. So I started reading the scriptures of Hinduism, Jainism, etc., etc. And I found the same God in all relations. Mm-hmm. We conducted a survey. We got more than 500 responses from people following 20 plus religions. All of them say, yes, we believe in an eternal being. That eternal being is wise, compassionate, forgiving. He hears everything, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, and things of that sort. And when I saw that similarity in the perception of the reality across religions, I discussed this with my friends of other religions, and we felt, yes, there are these similarities which need to be promoted. And that gave rise to the All Believers Network, which was founded about 13 years ago. And coincidentally, the chair of the All Believers Network is a Maryknoll sister. And we have people from 18 religions on our board, all looking at the converging paths of God. And it's wonderful, Michael. I have gone to worship services in many houses of worship. And when I have cleared my mind out of these cobwebs, I can see the same God everywhere, and it is wonderful.
Hey, brother, I'm in complete agreement with you. So the next time I'm in Honolulu, I will come see you and we will visit together. Let me say this. In the end, I really like what you're doing, and when I hear you talk about what you're talking about, I also think of other religions as well. So some of the things that you're discussing and how we twist words to get the result that we want, or we just simply misunderstand it. I don't think it's strictly contained to Islam. I think that happens in other walks of faith as well. And I think that your points are well made. But I want to give you the last word. I mean, what would you say to our viewers, non-Muslims, Muslims alike? In summation, what would you like to express?
Thank you very much, Michael. I would say that we must look at Islam in its chronological order and recognize that the final Islam is of peace. In fact, the religion was called Islam only in the final message, the final revelation that Muhammad got, which is verses 5.3 and 5.5. So I would urge our listeners, our viewers to recognize this and assure them that Islam in its final form was a message of peace. And this is not only just contained among the followers of Muhammad, but Islam, the idea of belief in one God and doing righteous deeds, is in all religions. There is no need to proselytize, there's no need to convert. Each one of us should look at the righteous messages in our religion and move forward, and therefore build up this camaraderie of all of us walking together towards the final eternal decision, the common destination of all of us.
Wonderful. I like the way you said that. Saleem, I really appreciate you coming on, and we are going to put links in the synopsis below the video so that people can check out your work and read the article that I mentioned, which was Challenging ISIS on Its Own Turf, which is very good. It goes into much of what we just discussed in far deeper detail and gives particular texts and examples so that you can get a better picture of what we're talking about. Saleem, thank you so much.
I just want to end, Michael, by thanking you for giving me this opportunity to share this message. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was something I learned a lot this week. And one of the things about doing this job is each week I try to come up with challenging material, and I have a lot of people helping me. And this week I want to give a shout out to our crew, because they help me a lot, and they always make me look good, and they always make this show look good. Stephen, Gabe, Brenda, Frank, Shazi, you guys rule completely, yo. My name is Michael Parker. This is Antidote. To all of you watchers, listeners, people, I wouldn't do this if there wasn't people to watch it. I thank you as well. Leave your comments below. Share us with your mom and dad, grandma, good friends down the road, whatever it is, if you dig what we're doing. My name is Michael Parker. This is Antidote. Until next week, you, me, every single one of us, all day long, we're the Antidote.